Just about 1 year ago, AEW held their first ever pay-per-view during the pandemic era. That pay-per-view was Double or Nothing 2020, and of course, it would be the first AEW pay-per-view that featured no fans at all. And while AEW did do their best with what they were given and delivered a pretty damn good show, you couldn't help but feel that this pandemic came at such a bad time for All Elite Wrestling. They had just come off a big, massive, successful show in Revolution. They were finally hitting their stride. They finally felt and looked like the massive number 2 promotion that American pro wrestling needed. But in the blink of an eye, it was gone just like that. And so for over 1 calendar year, we all suffered together, all while AEW still provided us a form of entertainment to get our minds off what we were going through. And I don't know how they did it, but they somehow managed to provide us with classic moments during the pandemic. But deep down, everybody watching still had one question in mind: when will we return to normal? When will we get crowds back? And sure, there were shows along the way that had 25% capacity or even 50% capacity, but what we all wanted to know was when we can fully pack an arena to watch pro wrestling. The wait wasn't easy, and it wasn't short either. But here we are now 1 year later after the first AEW pay-per-view that had no fans, seeing a familiar sight. A full jam-packed arena going crazy for an AEW show, and man was it worth the wait. This is Tranquilo Club, and this is a stellar return to normalcy with Double or Nothing 2021. I've said it before and I'll say it again. In my opinion, AEW crowds are the best in the business. They strike the right balance between loud, rabid, and loyal, while also being respectful for the most part and playing along with the product. They don't try to hijack shows, they don't try to get themselves over, they don't try to rearrange booking, because for the most part, AEW has goodwill with their fans. AEW gives the fan base what they want. And because AEW gives us what we want, we give them what they want. And that's a loud, loyal, passionate fan base. It's a match made in heaven, really. And the point I'm getting at is when it was announced that Double or Nothing 2021 would have 100% capacity crowd, that being 5,000 fans in attendance at Daly's Place, that show automatically became must watch. It didn't even matter what the card was gonna look like. This was gonna be a party. This was gonna be a celebration where we're finally gonna have a full crowd for an AEW show in over 1 year. But of course, AEW being AEW, they had to stack that fucking card, man. Double or Nothing 2021's card might be the single best card that AEW has ever put together, and I think the only one that even comes close is Full Gear 2020. But even then, this show, Double or Nothing 2021, is on another level. There were high expectations to live up to, and let me tell you, they far exceeded them. Every show on this card, except for maybe Cody and Ogogo, had a pretty good build going into it. So of course that added to the hype level, besides the fact that this would be the first pay-per-view for AEW in over a year to feature a full capacity crowd. And let's be honest here, AEW pay-per-views, regardless of the card, are always super hype because there's only 4 of them in the year. They always feel special. So this was gonna be hype regardless, but a full capacity crowd and an excellent card made the hype level just go through the roof. And so May 30th, 2021 came, and it's like AEW never missed a beat. It felt like Revolution before the pandemic hit. It was like the AEW of old, except it felt fresh because there were new faces, there were new stories, there were things we hadn't seen before. But most importantly, it felt normal. It felt good to be normal again. This show got off to a crazy hot start with Riho and Serena Deeb. They put on a fucking banger on the pre-show, and the crowd ate it up completely. This NWA Women's title match really set the tone for the rest of the night. The crowd was ready. They wanted good wrestling. They wanted AEW. And what they got was AEW at its very best. And what I mean by that is this show had everything that we've come to associate with AEW AEW for the past 2 years. Excellent in-ring work, great storytelling, star-making performances, surprises, veterans having great moments with younger talent, heartbreak, triumph, all those things in front of a rabid capacity crowd. From Hangman Page officially kicking off the show against Brian Cage in a pretty damn good match, where the crowd was crazy into Hangman like it was the road to Revolution 2020 all over again. Hangman winning and connecting with this crowd was the perfect way to start this pay-per-view. To up next with an absolute classic Young Bucks match, which is just expected at this point. Bucks versus Mox and Kingston for the AEW Tag Team titles was an insane match. You knew this was going to be a classic the minute that Wild Thing hit at Daly's place and Mox and Kingston came through the crowd as everybody cheered them on like fucking crazy. And of course, this was the first time that the Young Bucks were finally full-fledged heels in front of a full capacity AEW crowd, so they really played that up. This would have easily have been match of the night on any other wrestling pay-per-view. But this wasn't any other wrestling pay-per-view. This was Double or Nothing 2021, a show for the ages, and I'll touch on that a little more later. Next came the Casino Battle Royale, which is a staple of AEW's. Now, this match itself wasn't anything special, but it had some really cool moments. The first one being the surprise AEW debut of Lio Rush, but the second moment was the best moment of the match in my opinion, and that was the shock win when Jungle Boy eliminated Christian. The crowd was firmly behind Jungle Boy, and the whole time I'm thinking the crowd is gonna boo Christian Cage when he wins this match, and AEW did what AEW does. They swerved us, but it was the good kind of swerve. They gave Jungle Boy a star-making moment when he eliminated the veteran Christian Cage, and to say the crowd went wild is an understatement. A fantastic, fun 3 beginning matches for the pay-per-view. Now, after that came the Cody Rhodes versus Anthony Ogogo match, and like many of you, I wasn't feeling the build-up, the feud, or the match itself, so I'm not even gonna talk about it. This was by far the low point of the pay-per-view, and it drug the next match down with it. That match being Lance Archer versus Miro for the TNT title. And I'm gonna be honest, I was also mentally checked out of this match because of the Cody match, so I can't really say much about it because, well, I didn't watch it, so I'm sorry about that. But the match after this did get me back into the show because of 1, the excellent build-up, and 2, the high stakes. The AEW Women's World Title match between Hikaru Shida and Britt Baker. I think everybody knew going into this that this would be Britt Baker's crowning moment. She had earned it over the past year, but Hikaru Shida over the past year had also carried the women's division. So on a personal level, it was kind of hard to choose sides, but at the end, I was rooting for Britt Baker. These two women had an excellent match over a year ago during those tapings in Atlanta, you know, when the world shut down. So I expected a match just as, if not better, because, you know, the stakes had been raised. It was now for the AEW Women's title. And for whatever reason, I don't know, maybe something was off, maybe the crowd was still dead, I don't know, I don't think this match ever left like second gear, which is a shame because I had high expectations for this match. You know, these two women had been having bangers all year long, really. At the end of the day, it wasn't a bad match at all, but the important part was we did get the results we were all expecting, which was Britt Baker winning the AEW Women's World title. And it was a great moment for Britt Baker, who had put in the work of her life over the past year. Plus, that hug with Shivani was low-key emotional as hell. Now, the last 3 matches of this pay-per-view is when this show kicked back into high gear, on the same level as the first 3 matches of this pay-per-view. After the Women's Championship match, we had Sting and Darby Allin versus Scorpio Sky and Ethan Page. And man, this match took me back to being a kid, I swear. Growing up, I was a WCW fan. I was a little hardcore WCW mark, and Sting was my hero. That guy is in my top 3 favorite wrestlers of all time easily. So seeing him make this big comeback after how WWE treated him, you know, I was ecstatic. Add to that Darby Allin, who's one of my favorite wrestlers in the world today, and you know, I was just marking out the whole time. This couldn't have been booked any more perfectly. It wasn't a technical masterpiece by any means, but as far as working the crowd and getting people emotional goes, this was a masterpiece on that end. Credit to Scorpio Sky and Ethan Page, who played their roles perfectly for Sting's big return. And Sting, man, he had that crowd in the palm of his hand. They were going crazy for him, and it was beautiful. And man, some of the shit he was doing, I couldn't believe that he was still doing it, and he looked good for his age. And Darby Allin, you know, he was trying to kill himself like he always is. But seeing Sting and Darby Allin together, you know, is just one of my favorite things about AEW right now. Like I said, this match took me back to being a kid, and my only wish is that I wish my dad was here to see this with me. After this was my most highly anticipated match of the night, Kenny Omega versus Pac versus Orange Cassidy for the AEW World Championship, the first three-way match in AEW history for the world title. Now look, I had very high expectations for this match, and they somehow exceeded them. This match had it all. It was an emotional roller coaster. It's everything that a main event world title match on a pay-per-view should be. Now, I do want to say that I do plan on making a deep dive specifically on this one match on a separate video one day, so I'm not gonna go too deep into it. But what I will say is this was my favorite match of the night. All three of these men are superstars and future world champions. P.S. Fuck you, Don. Last, but certainly not least, was the Stadium Stampede match between the Inner Circle and the Pinnacle. Now, if you follow me on Twitter, you know how I was reacting to this match in real time. I wasn't really feeling it at first, but I did gradually get into it as it went on. There were some cool moments throughout, like the Urban Meyer cameo and the Conan cameo as well. But my overall favorite thing of this match is that it ended in the ring in front of the live crowd. Sammy Guevara, who had previously quit the Inner Circle, then rejoined, then cost his group the win at Blood and Guts, got the win for them here. And it just made for a really dope, feel-good moment to end the show as everyone was singing Judas with the Inner Circle in the ring celebrating. That's the perfect way to end your first show back with a full arena of fans. It almost felt like we were saying goodbye to the COVID era officially and welcoming in a new yet familiar era. In a strange way, it's kind of bittersweet. You know, we didn't want to be stuck at Daly's place forever, but we were there for so long that we grew accustomed to it. It almost felt like home at this point, but it also felt good to know that we would be finally moving on to what we once knew, to that pre-pandemic era, to normalcy. This was the show we needed. Double or Nothing 2021 was a goodbye to one era, yet at the same time, a hello to a new one. Earlier in this video, I said that this pay-per-view is one for the ages, and it is because it only adds to Double or Nothing's already weird legacy. I mean, Double or Nothing 2019 was AEW's first show ever. Then Double or Nothing 2020 was the first ever pay-per-view during the pandemic era. And now Double or Nothing 2021 is like the last show of the pandemic era, yet the first show of a new one. And AEW made sure that we went out with a bang. This show absolutely delivered, and we'll be talking about matches on this show for a very long time. Top to bottom, it's hard to argue that there's ever been a stronger card put together for an AEW pay-per-view. Personally, this show still sits at number 3 for me in AEW pay-per-view rankings, but I can easily see how this could be someone's favorite AEW pay-per-view ever. As I said before, this show had everything that we love about pro wrestling. This show was a love letter to professional wrestling. And the best part about this love letter to professional wrestling is that there was a full capacity crowd there to witness it happen, just as there was prior to March 2020 when the world shut down. The legacy of Double or Nothing 2021 could have easily just been the show that had a full crowd back in over a year. But AEW ensured that the legacy of Double or Nothing 2021 is the show that reminded us why we love pro wrestling. The show that brought us back to normalcy in the best way possible.